Just think of me as the world's most famous unknown author. Who was Harvey Arden? He was born in Chicago, Illinois, land of the wild onions, to the Indian people. And I had very little concept of Indian people. They were some kind of remote thing to me when I was a little boy in the city. And we had a Potawatomi Park and other strange Indian names. And I was supposed to go to college, and I always thought I'd go to college, and spent maybe 10 days at Santa Monica City College, and God, it must have been 1952, 3. And it was all, they kept making us go out to the football field for the football team. And I wanted to study, you know. Here I was, I wanted to study. And after 10 days, I said, I've had enough of this. And I left college, went to work in a bookstore in Los Angeles. And that was the beginning of my career there. I never did get back to college. I did get 2 college credits, once for a one-time course in philosophy, 301 course in philosophy at the University of Illinois, where I worked as a sound technician for a time. Well, I went through a series of jobs. In my 20s, one thing I could always do, seemingly that they liked, was write. So I became a writer, and I worked for a number of encyclopedias and World Book, Americana. And so for many years I did that, both in Chicago and then in New York, and got jobs with various publishers. And one day there was an ad in the New York Times, National Geographic, looking for a legend writer. What's this? Legend writer? Well, legends at National Geographic are what they call captions elsewhere. And I applied for it. It was just 2 blocks from where I was working in Washington. And lo and behold, they gave us a set of legends to write, which I did. And I think several hundred people tried, and lo and behold, Harvey Arden won out, little Harvey. You know, I guess I was 30, in my early 30s by then. And for the next 23 years, I worked at National Geographic, doing all kinds of stories, all around the world, India, Middle East, Europe. Story about Hans Christian Andersen, a story in the footsteps of Moses. Gee, so many stories, a couple dozen, over 23 years. And sometime I think of a night in the Sinai desert, driving from Tel Aviv down to Sinai. At the time, Sinai was about to be turned over from the Egyptians from the Israelis back to the Egyptians. And I remember a night, I was playing this music. I was driving down with the guy I was driving, the fellow with me. And it was night. He said, I'm going to turn off the lights. It was bright moon. And so we were driving in the middle of the night down through Central Road towards Mount Sinai, and it was magical. The moon was blowing, just powerful moon.
This is Harvey Arden, and we're glad to be here. He's a writer and a journalist for National Geographic for over 23 years. He's authored 7 books that I know of, including The Wisdom Keepers, which is a compilation of different Native American and indigenous peoples.
Ta-da!
Ta-da! He's traveled the world, seen many, many things, spoken to many, many people. Without further ado, here's Harvey Arden.
Where is he? Oh, I see. That's right. I'm just waking up here. Let's get right to Peltier. Have you guys all seen this movie, Incidental Oglala? Or most of them. Is anybody here who doesn't know who Leonard Peltier is? Okay, you don't know the name. And 1975, in June 1975, there was a shootout that seem to be related, among some Indians on a reservation out in South Dakota called Pine Ridge, between some FBI agents and a group of Indian people who had gathered there to protest conditions on the Pine Ridge Reservation and also defend their own elders, because there was something called a goon squad going around shooting and killing and maiming and terrifying people on behalf of the corrupt tribal chief who was in cahoots with the government in Washington to steal this land and take everything and give nothing back to the Indians. So this is pretty typical treatment of Indians to this day, as a matter of fact. The FBI was allegedly looking for a fellow named Leonard Peltier, who had escaped on bond from Milwaukee, where he had been charged for attempted murder of a cop. Later on, years later, he was acquitted of that charge entirely. But it was what was used to catch him. They always invent things that they can then go continue their fictional story of all the terrible things they've done. So they created a scenario that never happened. It was one of the cases, one of the most overt cases in our history, I think, where the flat truth just didn't matter. Well, at one point, this guy, Steve Wall, walks into my office at Geographic and says, "Harvey, I met this Indian. He's a photographer. I barely knew him. He's an outside photographer. He wasn't at Geographic. He's a contract photographer." So he says, "Harvey, I've met this Indian." He says, "Yeah? So, you met an Indian, so what?" He says, "Well, he's got this terrific story he talks about. I'd like to go do a story with him. He's a medicine man." He was asked by two elders, one Wolf Sequoia up in Carolina and the other Billy Josie down in Florida, the Seminole. They both asked him to come and study with them. And he thought about it and he says, "Well, I don't know, I want to become one of these higher, ceremonial figures." So he declined to study with either of these two great elders, our famous elders. And then they both died very rapidly after that. And he was really torn that he'd been offered this privileged experience and had declined it, and then they died, and now it was gone. And he felt like he owed somebody something. He wanted to take a journey of penance to the various, and he had in mind the 7 Indian nations, what he called the Cherokee, the Seminole, the Lakota, all over the country, and really 7 languages. And so I talked Geographic into doing that story. It was my job, and I was to become the editor of it. And he and Steve were going to go out on this journey in what they called the Ramblin teepee, and it was a nifty story. Unfortunately, he was going around to all the other elders, and this really put him off a little. He didn't feel still competent to talk to all these elders, and one day he turned to Steve and says, "I'm taking off." He says, "What do you mean you're taking off? We're in the middle of a National Geographic story. We had given them money and expense." And he says, "No, I'm taking off. This is your journey now." And Steve called me up and told me, "Well, it's over. 2 trees just took off." And I said, "Well, hell, I was supposed to write it anyway, or at least edit it. And why don't we keep doing it, and I'll take his role. I'll play what I was, a National Geographic, writer." And so we did. We started off on that, and it has not ended to this day. That was at least 35 years ago. And we've done so many stories. My last story at Geographic, next to last story, had been something that was supposedly to be, they wanted a story on medicine men. I'd introduced the idea of medicine men anyway with 2 trees. And so they decided they were going to do trip of me and Steve traveling around just talking to elders in the various tribes, and which indeed we did set off on. And that became, well, we went and did it. We brought back some wonderful film. I had a terrific story to write. And they came up to me and they killed the story. They came to Harvey, that's what they do at Geographic. He didn't like Steve's pictures, which were actually magnificent. And that was the time. Shortly after that, I decided to leave Geographic and go do this on my own. Hell with it. Hell with waiting for somebody to tell you what to do, giving you permission. So they killed the story. Steve took it to a publisher named Beyond Words in Portland, Oregon, the idea of it. And they said, yeah, we'll do it. We like your pictures, and we'll do a story in a magazine or something with you. And so he called me and said, Harvey, you're going to write this? Because I don't think I could write it. And I said, you bet. We went off, and that became the book Wisdom Keepers, which was an instant bestseller back in 1990. Wisdom Keepers, a spirit journey into the lives of Native American wisdom keepers. I later did the same thing in Australia with the Aboriginal people, wonderful people, just like Indian people, so much. And went on to do many stories in the footsteps of Moses, Hans Christian Andersen, Chicago, Sumatra, 20-odd stories for Geographic. That was quite a career. That was the middle of my life, the middle 23 years. I was 33 when I started, and 33 and 55 or so when I left Geographic. And since then, I produced about 10 books here, all relating to indigenous wisdom philosophy. And why a nice Jewish white boy like me is doing this kind of work, I don't know, but the Creator arranges things.
I wanted to do some spiritual stories on the elders of Native Americans, because elders have a different status in Native America, even in their Tonawanda, Tuscarora, than elders in our so-called dominant society. I hate that phrase. Like me, I'm not an elder. I'm a senior citizen. It carries some definite benefits. Get a few bucks from the government to keep us alive. And you put a few more bucks together, you might actually eat. And Indians don't get the extra bucks. Very few times, unless they get some casino money, and they don't get much of that. Most of that winds up in somebody else's coffers.
So much that people don't know, but on the hill here we have medicine. And you have to know the male and the female. Of course, in the birds, the plants, the male is always the prettiest. It's like putting your last dollar on the horse that's just wobbling in the race or something like that. You're going to lose. And because you have to look at the future. It's so uncertain.
That's what Dreamkeeper's Net is about.
Yeah, it's the turmoil. It's all around us.
Little house is right. Little house? You live on Upper Mountain? I live right around the corner from Randy's Smoke Shop.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
Oh my god.
Because this guy was an artist. He would have loved to have been in this class. He goes to doesn't look that different than this the little art room. Until recently, when he was still in Leavenworth, he just actually left a few months ago. I did a story in '87 on the Iroquois Confederacy, and I was at Tonawanda, Tuscarora, Cattaraugus, Allegheny, Onondaga, and so forth. This all refers to the Lakota Pine Ridge Reservation when he's talking here. My life is an Indian life. I'm a small part of a much, much larger story. The personal specifics of my life are unimportant. Being an Indian, that is what is important. My autobiography is the story of my people, the Indian people of this great Turtle Island. My people, our sovereignty, our nationhood, our very identity, along with our sacred lands, have been stolen from us in one of the great thefts of human history. I refer not just to the thefts of the previous centuries, but to the great thefts that are still being perpetrated on us today, this very day, at this very moment. Our human rights as indigenous peoples are being violated every day of our lives, and by the very same people who loudly and sanctimoniously proclaim to other nations the moral necessity of such human rights. Our sacred lands have been repeatedly and routinely stolen from us by the governments of the United States and Canada. It's called colonialism. And when their efforts to colonize indigenous peoples are met with resistance or anything but abject surrender, why, it's called war. We're called criminals. We are the original people. We are one of the fingers on the hand of humankind. Why is it we're unrepresented in our own lands? Without even one seat, much less many seats in the United Nations? Why is it we're allowed to send our delegates only to prisons and cemeteries?
Leonard is now down, starting his 42nd year in prison. I met him first in 1996, where I actually went to, at that time he was staying in Leavenworth in Kansas. And I visited him there 5 or 6 times, and Leonard had been a reader of my stories at Geographic, I found out. He knew who I was. In fact, I had written an earlier book, Noble Red Man, that I had sent to him like 94. I didn't know him, but it mentioned him, so I sent him a copy. And he knew that, he loved that. That was the Noble Red Man book. Got a play on that too. Got 5 plays. So, and that's been my life since then. Mostly home alone in the basement, working on the computer. That's the dramatic, romantic life I have. Now, I have worked up 3 or 4 different scripts from Leonard's book, Prison Writings, My Life is My Sundance, where I envisioned it as a presentation, not quite a play, but a dramatic presentation directly to the audience. You're talking to the audience rather than to each other. And I must have written 3, 4 different scripts for that. And Fidel called me. I had known Fidel from about 10 years ago, but he called me recently and said he just wanted permission to read the play at this very venue. And I said, fine, but I'd love to do it with you, because I've done it myself many times on stage. And so Leonard's very excited about us being here. Keep his name alive. They want him to die there, and he probably will. He's not well. 42 years. 42 years is enough. Take me down from the cross. Please, please take me down. You took Jesus down in 2 days. Why can't I get out after 42 years? And that's what it is for him. It's torture. On the other hand, he's lived a magnificent life. Probably not a very pleasant one. He supposedly shot 2 FBI agents. He did not. The first time I visited him towards the end, he walked up to me and took my shoulders and just stared right into my eyes. He says, Harvey, I want you to know, I want you to believe that I did not kill those agents. You have to believe that. Believe me, I do. And the whole story was a sham of the FBI's. As you start reading into it, God knows how many books I've read on it. And here I am. It's become my mission in life, in a way. I never would have chosen it, but I feel lucky to be used by the Creator for something.
Guilt has 1,000 voices. all of them lies. As I speak to you good souls here today, this innocent man, Leonard Peltier, sits in his prison cell in a Florida prison. Now, 71 years old, he's been incarcerated since he was 31, having spent nearly 42 years in prison for a crime the whole world, and especially the FBI, who put him there, knows he never committed.
I, Leonard Peltier, I am the Indian voice. Listen to me. Hear us. We are a collective voice of Indian people, indigenous people, but we speak for the world.
Hi, this is Harvey Arden for the Wisdom Keepers series. I'm here with grandmother Edna Gordon out on the Cattaraugus Reservation, about an hour's drive south of Buffalo, an ancient place. And Edna is, tell me, you're the Hawk Elder. What does that mean, the Hawk Elder?
We go by the clans. And
you
my
have a
mother, we go by the mothers. My mother was the Hawk clan. My grandmother always said, you say hen hawk, because the people started to take off some of those other things that really meant what kind of clan you were. But in modern times, it just went by the 8 clans here. But my grandmother always said, you go by the hen hawk clan, because that's what we really are.
Yeah, I know a hairy hen hawk up in Six Nations.
Yeah, but that's the name. The other ones are clans, whatever your mother was. And the clans came from the animals. And that's how they got their clans, by the bear clan, the deer clan.
And this is the Seneca Nation.
Yeah, we have 8 clans here. And the other 6 nations of New York State maybe have 5, maybe some have 8, maybe according to their land.
Right.
Yeah.
Don't the Mohawks have 14?
Yeah.
They're all on the condolence cane
Yeah.
of the Taradaho, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
49 or 51, I forget
yeah.
now how many years
And the
ago.
people have stuck by their clans, but they don't really understand, the background of it. They don't know the background of anything, of why we have the clans. And the ancient times they did live, that's where the Indians learned a lot from the animal, because they learned survival, they learned everything, because they traveled together. That's why they always said that the animals, the creatures, were the brothers to the Indians. Down in here until 1922, they cut this road in here. And the road from the reservation was all this way to the creek. And so the people came from this way, and they went right through here on this bridge, and went across here, and came up. Those roads weren't there. Where my daughter's house is, that's where the road went and came out to Buffalo Road. That was the old Burning Spring Road, of where the people travel in their horse and buggies. So I had that bridge cleared off, and I want to put a historical sign on it. That was the old, and then back here they call it the old gold mine road. They had all farms back here.
Yeah, there was a gold mine around here too?
No, it was a fake one where all the people went and they called it that, and it wasn't at all. Not to drink too much of it because it thins the blood. See? It's a tea. The trees that are in front that are orange now,
Yeah.
those are the mountain ash, and they don't know that you make the jelly out of that, and you take the seeds, and that's what you will plant to make your other trees. And the same way with the roses in February, those hard knobs that are on there after, you take those off, and then you plant those in February. And that's how you get your other roses.
How about that?
Yeah.
What is that? Which?
Thorn plant. They have flowers that go high like this.
Which one are you talking about?
Those green ones behind them, see the two?
Oh, those.
Because when you go to dig them up, they go down to China. That's why everybody has to have their own way. And ours, this is beautiful up here. You can feel the peace. It's beautiful. And the kids, all this land here, clear back to the creek. They had the little falls, the big falls, and this was our children's playground, our grandchildren's playground. This is what's good for they understand the psychology, philosophy of a life because you grow up with it. You live with nature. We go in that road, up in there, right at that corner, and at the old homestead, and you could see where the apple trees were, the rhubarb.
There was a house there?
Oh, yeah, years
what
ago.
year would that?
Oh,
date
way
be?
back, and
Is that in your
way back years, yeah.
Is Hannibal's family had this all the way back
He's
in the
for,
1800s?
He's religious. Yeah, we got all the deeds for everything from the 1800s. And all this was farmland. Pretty near all of it. And part woods.
This field is amazing. It's just so flat.
Yeah.
So there was this beautiful umbrella tree around us, and I'd like to read because this little introduction talks about it right off the bat. Welcome to my umbrella tree, says Hawk Elder Edna Gordon, seating herself opposite me at her well-weathered backyard picnic table, gesturing with a wide sweep of her hand at the rich tapestry of the overhanging branches that arched all the way to the ground around us, creating a kind of natural gazebo. She nods at the tree as at a cherished old friend, and then she nods at me, her visitor. This old tree's the whole of creation. You know that? If you got eyes to see, she said. And her throaty voice trails away thoughtfully. I look upward into the drooping canopy of heavily leafed branches, all but encasing us. It's like a house of leaves, I say. More than that, she says. The whole creation's right here in this tree, if you can see it. You're sitting right inside of creation itself, don't you see? Can't you feel it? I put the palm of my hand on the rough bark of the trunk. I can feel it, I guess, I said. Your hand on the tree, she said. That's life on life. The umbrella tree here. This is at the center of the universe. And so are we. Certainly when you're with a visionary, like Edna Gordon, the universe, the creation itself, occupies not only the background of your consciousness, but the foreground. She's continually reminding me and all of us of the often forgotten fact that we exist. That the world, the universe, the very creation itself is here now with us at this very magical moment. It's always called now. And that it's our privilege, it's our joy, our duty as living beings to realize this in every conscious moment, to see it, to appreciate it, to be ever thankful and ever marveling at all of this unthinkable vastness and infinite particularity around us and within us. She insists that we see, yes, feel, like with my hand, this miracle, that we ourselves are an integral, even essential part of this mystery beyond all mysteries. Yep, it's all a mystery, a holy mystery, Edna says. No matter how far you look, that's all you're ever going to find at the end of your looking, a holy mystery. But how are we individual human beings essential to that mystery, I ask her. And Edna smiles, that radiant smile of hers. It is radiant, is it not? And with her bare toe, she lightly taps a tiny bloom in the grass at her foot. Is a flower essential to the universe, she asks? Some folks will tell you, oh no, it's just a flower, a little flower. It lives and dies in a day or two. What does creation need this silly little flower for? Well, I'll tell you. That little tiny flower, you see it there by my toe? The little white one, no bigger than a lady's earring? That flower is essential. That's right, I'm telling you, it is essential to the whole wide universe. Same as you, same as me, same as every one of us. We're all essential to creation. Each and every one of us. Why, without that tiny little flower there, it'd be a different universe. A different creation, not this one. Not the one we have, you understand? So that's a mighty power, don't you think? One little flower, that little tiny flower, can change the entire world. just like one person can. And she chuckles, amused at her thought. Now, some might see a quaint little old lady here, but of Edna Gordon I can tell you from years of personal observation that quaint she ain't. No, in this diminutive octogenarian, maybe 5'2", on her stretched taut tiptoes. How tall are you? Who knows? Old people keep changing their size. I see a fearless warrior against injustice, a bold partisan on behalf of Mother Earth, an implacable defender of her people and of all indigenous people. I see her also as a natural world philosopher, seeing the inexplicable mystery of existence in the simplest, most ordinary things. A tiny flower, a red-tailed hawk in flight, a sudden summer windstorm whipping the treetops. To Edna, these gifts of Creator inspire a truly spiritual joy and an infinite thankfulness at being a conscious, living presence in the very midst of the puzzle of creation. She radiates that wonder, that devout appreciation, that thankfulness in every word of this little book of hers. I first met Edna some 5 or 6 years ago when I was trying to create a website for the Dream Keepers project, I called it, that would be the digital portal to an ever-growing constellation of personal websites for and about indigenous elders. Its motto was bringing the elders to the world and the world to the elders. Dream Keepers itself was a successor to the Wisdom Keepers project. And Dream Keepers was to be the culmination of more than a quarter a century of me traveling among and working with indigenous peoples, begun while I was still a staff writer for 23 years at National Geographic, and continued after my 1991 retirement in such trade books as Wisdom Keepers, Meetings with Native American Spiritual Elders, this book, Dream Keepers, my book about Australia, and a bunch of others. One day I answered the phone. A rough gravel woman's voice says, "You Harvey Arden? This is Edna Gordon. I got some books for you to publish." "You do? Books, you say? How many books?" "Or maybe 10, maybe 30. I think she even said 40. "Really?" I said. "Paper books you're talking about?" "I'm trying to create a website for the elders, but I never tried to publish a book. Though I've had half a dozen of my own published. You're maybe talking about a digital online book?" She said, "Nope." She said, "A real paper book. I got 30 of them, maybe 40. "Already published?" "Well, I had them printed myself. I got a few copies each. How much you charge?" I said, "We don't charge anything to elders. But we don't publish books, Edna. We just do a website, certainly not paper books." And she said, "Well, you will." And so against all odds, I might have given at the time, here is Edna's book. Much to my amazement, the voice of the Hawk Elder, which to my mind is an incandescent torch to light our way in these dark times. And this beloved lady.
And we have more to do because we want to hear the voices. We are the earth voices. And we're giving a job to Harvey and to Perry to have us heard. That's the only way we can do
And
it.
every one of you here is important.
Yeah, we gotta be heard.
We are very important. Ain't no
write
accident.
your
These
books or
particular
whatever
bunch
you
of
got.
people are
You
right
can't
here.
do it.
Right?
Do your writing, do your painting, do your talent, do whatever you were gifted. Use it.
Use your blessed elders while you got them.
Yeah.
And
We
you
don't
know,
have
you all
everybody
become
know.
the elders yourselves before you know it. In the indigenous world. In my world, the white world, you become a senior citizen. You don't become an elder. You don't become a wisdom keeper. But in the indigenous world, the
elders, the older you grow, the more people listen to you. Instead of shoving you off in an old age home, right?
Yeah. And you gotta do it before you keep shrinking. Like the older you get, you shrink. If I keep shrinking, I'll be like those little gigantos in the wood. The little people.
Taking the story of the elders to the world. And what it's had various names, the Wisdom Keepers Project, you know, bringing the elders to the world and the world to the elders is the motto. And that's what I've worked on. But the internet is something that in the future, we today here in 2017, we're leaving this to you, whoever you are. You know, and you have this internet, I presume, unless they've taken it away from you, where you can leave a record of the lives of your own people, individuals. And that's what I've done with my life, is record a lot of individuals. All this stuff would not exist had I not become involved. I mean, these words, I'm a word man. Words is what I deal with. Words are what I eat and digest and put back out. Excuse me for the analogy, but so it's been a good and a lucky life for me, worthless scoundrel that I am. I was involved years ago with Pam in what we call Dream Keepers Net, based on my book Dream Keepers, and runs a wonderful horse ranch for abandoned horses and abandoned old authors. And she's a treasure, and she's going to help bring us to this wider world until I kick off. Then you guys have the job to carry it on from there. One of the people I met was Orville Looking Horse. We did a book together of his called White Buffalo Teachings. So I'm very fortunate not only in my assignment in life, but in my fellow travelers.